Welcome back to the Money Wisdom Podcast, powered by Johnson Bernetti. This is Nick Colantuono and Jake Dozer, certified financial planners and advisors on the team here at Johnson Bernetti. Nick, as always, it's a pleasure, and let's hop right in. So we're looking at a question that was written in for us to answer today. The question is this: I'm planning to retire in about 5 years, and most of my assets are in real estate. I have about $250,000 in a 401k. But I have well over $2 million in equity in rental properties. Do I have too much in real estate? I'm trying to decide if I should sell one of my properties and focus on putting more money into my 401k for the next 5 years. A lot of things going on here. We need to focus on cash flow. We need to focus on diversification. We need to focus on liquidity. We need to focus on income. Nick, where do we start? What is this person's first step when they're trying to assess where they're at in their preparedness for retirement?
Look, it's all about having a plan. And when you look at the viewer's question, obviously you have to take that question in different chunks. The first part of it is, I'm planning to retire in about 5 years. So they're still working. They're still earning. They're still making contributions into this $250,000 401k that they talk about. So it's not only important to know that they have money coming in, and obviously they're very cash flow positive, or else they wouldn't be putting money into that 401k. But it's also important to think about whether this $2 million in what they call rental properties, okay, well, that's also generating, income each and every month. So is that income that they're generating being spent? Do they have debt on that property? Is that money getting reinvested into the market in, an annually taxable account or a trust account? So obviously there's a lot to unpack here. And as financial planners, this is someone I just want to sit down with and really ask kind of the deeper questions, not just how much do you have in retirement accounts and how much do you have in, the value of your real estate, but what type of income is it generating? What are the taxes? What are your expenses associated with those properties? What are your headaches associated with those properties? So obviously a lot to uncover. So Jake, I like the fact that they're coming to us 5 years before they're retired, because this is what Joel Johnson, our CEO, calls the retirement red zone. You don't want to be thinking about retirement a week before you're retiring. You want to come in, whether it's 5 years, 10 years, and really put a plan in place. So I know you're kind of thinking the same thing. I mean, this is someone I would love to have a more deeper conversation with, not just how much they've saved and kind of what they have in equity, but really what's the purpose of all this? And then get into those more targeted conversations about cash flow, expenses, all that.
That's exactly right. I think sometimes we get so focused on the numbers. Is like, well, is my rental property generating a good ROI, return on investment? Well, that's important. But I think what's more important is tailoring it to the unique needs of an individual. What do you want your retirement lifestyle to look like? If your retirement lifestyle does not align with having to manage either actively or passively multiple pieces of real estate, well, then it doesn't matter how good the ROI is on your real estate. If your lifestyle is not going to support the time commitment that it takes to be able to manage that property, well, then it's not a good investment, because effectively you have to decide, am I looking to be an active investor or a passive investor? If I'm looking to be an active investor, am I, as I get older, capable physically and mentally and with the time? Am I capable of managing these properties? The second piece is, if I'm not capable of those things, which does require some humility to acknowledge. The second question is the folks who are going to be receiving this asset from me at some point, my heirs, my beneficiaries, my significant other, my spouse, if I were to pass away and they inherit it, are they going to want to deal with it? Or would it be easier for me to unwind this real estate knowing that I am in a place of expertise on it so that my heirs don't have to deal with it? So you have to start with the end in mind. Is what lifestyle am I looking to tailor with my investments before we address them by name? What lifestyle is it supporting? Number two, is someone else in my family going to have to deal with a headache because I choose to concentrate my investments in this area? And then number three, then we can get into the meat and potatoes, but I'm thinking as well, transitioning from those philosophical questions, I'm thinking of, is this investment too concentrated? Meaning, do I have too many eggs in one basket? Because I see two baskets that you have too many eggs in potentially. You've got potentially too many eggs in the basket of self, right? So the idea is that if you are the catalyst for these things to work, for this real estate investment strategy to work, if you're the only partner and if nobody else in your family or in your professional sphere can deal with it if something happens to you via disability, through sickness, through death, well, then it's too many eggs in that basket. Number two, is real estate what you want to put all your eggs in the basket of? You have to ask yourself, what if a 2008 housing crisis comes again? And you're like my folks who bought a house 6 months prior and it went from a value of $350,000 to $150,000. Am I at the place where I can lose 2/3 of my equity and be okay? Am I at the place where if all of a sudden I can't get a tenant in for a year or 2 years, I recognize that maybe having that $250,000 as a cushion might feel like enough, but $250,000 can go quick when a piece of real estate needs a new roof and you can't get a tenant in for a year, right? So there's a lot of functional questions before you get into the math that you have to deal with. But I think we've spent a lot of time talking about aligning your objectives with it and the philosophical questions of segueing into a new lifestyle. What are some of the math things that in the numbers, the data, Nick, that we need to be addressing?
Taxes. It's always taxes, because if your equity or if your ability to access money lives, as this client is stating, in a 401k, well, you mentioned the fact the roof goes on your building and, you need $100,000 to replace it. Well, if that's all coming out of a 401k, you've probably got to be taking out more like $130,000 or $150,000. So having not only different buckets of liquid assets to tap into when you need it, but also being able to kind of control the tax implications of taking that money out. So for this person, you mentioned the numbers. I mean, taxes are probably going to be one of their biggest expenses, not to mention if they've got, a $2 million property or $2 million in properties, there's likely annual taxes owed on those properties. And then you're generating rent and there's taxes owed on that rent. And, there's expenses and maintenance and upkeep. So I would like to think that this person also has positive cash flow from working and from the rental properties where they've been able to amass some sort of liquidity outside of that 401k. But again, the question that they pose, it doesn't go into that level of detail. So I think if anything, that just drives the value of having a conversation with folks like us, where we almost know the questions to ask and we know what to really drill down on. And for someone like this, who clearly their efforts are focused in the real estate world and they've done very well in that world, but it's a whole different ballgame when all of a sudden you're now no longer working and now you have to be living off of this money. So hopefully the rent that they're generating will be enough to cover their monthly expenses on top of Social Security, which if they're putting money into a 401k, they've likely been paying into Social Security as well. So obviously there's a lot more to uncover here. But again, do I have too much money in real estate? That's really hard for us to say at this point in time.
Are you ready to retire with confidence? Join us for our retirement planning workshop and learn strategies to maximize Social Security, healthcare, income planning, taxation, and more. Text WORKSHOP to 800-757-0436 to reserve your spot, or click the link in this week's show for more details on how to register.
You're exactly right, Nick. And I think, to put it succinctly, it's not all about what you make. It's also about what you keep. And that's where tax planning comes into play. Again, there's so much more meat on the bones with this, but I hope that today's money wisdom question was helpful. I hope the Money Wisdom podcast has been a nice resource for you. If we can ever help, be sure to reach out, shoot us a message, give us a call. We'd be happy to chat with you further. And if you want to make sure that you hear this content next time, make sure you give this video a like, subscribe, and make sure to share if somebody else sounds like the person described in today's video. We'll see you next time with Jake and Nick on the Money Wisdom podcast.
Investment advisory services offered through JB Capital LLC. Insurance products offered through JN Financial LLC.